What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing bizarre encounters with creepy, faceless humanoids. I'm sorry, I'm sick again, and it was either do the video today or have no upload, and I like to be responsible and consistent in my upload schedule, so it is what it is. I thought long and hard about what to name this video because the entities we're going to be discussing, though mainly they're faceless, are in a category of undefined creatures and humanoids, basically all of their own. Essentially, I have no dang idea what the F we're dealing with here, guys. I thought about calling it high strangeness, and that might also be a good fit, so maybe just consider these encounters under the high strangeness umbrella, if you will. I'm talking about, for the most part at least, these faceless humanoid entities. These things don't seem to be cryptids, extraterrestrials, demons, ghosts, spirits, elementals, and the only thing I can really say about them is that they're humanoid. Don't get me wrong, they could be any of the above mentioned entities, a combination of all or some, or none at all. Most of these encounters today do involve faceless humanoid entities, as I said, with one or two other encounters with unknowns thrown in because I have nowhere else to put them, and they seem to be equally bizarre and becoming much more malignant nowadays. Just know, guys, that so many people are coming forward with their own encounters of faceless entities that I already had another video dedicated just to them on my schedule for a Monday upload, and that one's coming soon as well. I think it's best to let the encounters themselves do the talking, so without further ado, let's jump right in. Reddit poster Janella Jones said she had her encounter after moving to an area of Essex, which I'm assuming is in England because I'm not a geographist and my source material doesn't exactly specify. So she described where she moved as being, quote, not totally in the middle of nowhere, but lots of forests and dark country roads with no street lights in that area, end quote. She said she and her boyfriend, who she gave the name of Dan, were just driving alone and minding their own business on a dark rural road and passing by a lot of open fields in the pitch black darkness of the night. Remember, she said there are no streetlights or any other type of illumination, according to our witness. They ended up on a road that was only narrow enough to fit one car driving on it, and the road was pitch black dark. It was somehow much darker even than where they had just been with all of the open spaces and fields that were surrounding them. She talked about the terrifying and extremely strange experience they had while on this narrow road by saying, quote, stupidly, I sped up, wanting to find my way out of the dark roads quickly. It became apparent I was driving too fast for the bumpy roads, so initially I had to slow down. And once I did, I felt a deep thud on the roof of my car, like something had landed on it. I slammed on my brakes, and my boyfriend and I looked at each other, but all we heard was silence. Then we heard two loud thumps on the roof of the car, almost like someone pounding a fist on it. I looked at my boyfriend and he looked at me, all pale and wide-eyed, so I slammed the car into gear and took off down the road, seriously panicking now. I couldn't see anything in the mirrors, and up ahead was a small bridge that went over a tiny river. I sped over the bridge, and then the road veered sharply to the right. As I took this corner, the entire road was illuminated in my headlights, and it was covered in blood. Literally so much blood, like a very big animal had been slaughtered there. There weren't any animal remains, but the amount of blood was ridiculous. I screamed, "What the hell is that?" and looked at my boyfriend, who was looking out of his window. I looked at where he was looking, and we could see a faint figure of a man running alongside our car. Safe to say, I totally pooped myself and took off at a very high speed. Luckily, we were only 5 to 10 minutes from the main road and miraculously managed to find our way back. As soon as we got to my house, I literally ran in and locked the door and swore to myself I would never drive that way again. It took Dan a good 20 minutes to convince me to drive back on the well-lit, busy way, as by this point I was in a bit too much of a state to even really drive. Scariest moment of my life, and to this day, I don't know what it all was. The vision of the guy running was described as faint because it wasn't just a regular person. I don't really know how to describe it because although it was pitch black outside the car, the person that was running also looked like it was black, but we could still make out the shape. The face had no features. It was almost a bit shimmery at the edges, but was definitely human form, even if it wasn't a human. Whatever it was also managed to keep up with my car, which was quite a feat considering I was driving it like a monster truck because I was so scared. There were no trees or anything around for a mile or two, so when we could see the guy running, he would have just been running on grass, but there was something not quite right about it. The vibe I got was that it wasn't a person but an entity, and it was all connected. Like the thing we saw running was the same thing that made the noise on the roof of my car and created the blood. Just thinking about it now sends a shiver down my spine. I didn't sleep properly for weeks after that, and even now I hate driving down country roads alone. End quote. Wow. So there were at least a couple of few things that came to my mind while reading through this one. Did they catch a shapeshifter right before or after the moment of transformation? I ask that only because of these shimmering edges that she described. Otherwise, it kind of sounded like a shadow person like we know and are used to them, but I know with absolute certainty they feed off of energy and not by killing or slaughtering us. They don't need blood. They have been known to kill, and normally the person is said to have had a heart attack or something like that. Again, what's with the blood? So to me, that rules out regular shadow entities completely. Was it something like we talked about last week with the dark black humanoid entities? That sounds about exactly right to me, guys, but the thing is, we still don't know what those things were, and they were all, seemingly at least, something different from one another. I am totally confused. And honestly, it scared me a little to think that whatever this thing was, it was so brazen as it showed itself like that. But let's think about that too. How many times have we heard about people seeing things they probably weren't supposed to after a glitch or a possible timeline/dimension jump? I have no idea. And honestly, it was giving me a headache. So, I don't know if you guys know this about me or not, but I love me some George Norrie, and Beyond Belief is the ultimate for me and will be the ultimate for my career once I go on there. It's like my Springsteen, okay? I mention George here because we have another bizarre and seemingly unclassifiable encounter from July 15th, 2016 from a man who only calls himself Nate from Indianapolis, Indiana that was discussed on Coast to Coast AM. Another lifetime goal, just saying. Nate said he is a truck driver and was traveling down a very desolate, dark, and lonely stretch of Route 80 when he saw something that nightmares are made of. His encounter went like this, quote, "It was about dusk and the sun was just about to set and I was driving and I seen a figure just ahead of me on I-80 and it was right on the side of the road. When I say right on the side of the road, I don't mean in the grass. Its toes were right on the white line. I slowed down a little bit to kind of see what was going on there and maybe avoid it. When I got about 50 yards from it, I got down to about 50 miles per hour and I could see it clear. I had my brights on and everything. It was a man. Well, it looked like a man, about maybe 5'9" or 5'10". Couldn't have been more than 100 pounds soaking wet. And when I got up to him, he looked at me and George, I kid you not, he had no eyes, no mouth, and no nostrils. There was no orifice on his face. He was pale white, no hair, no features whatsoever. It looked like a skeleton with bleached white skin. He was just kind of standing there looking right at me. I slowed down, and as soon as I saw his face, he looked at me. Boy, I flipped the hammer down from Illinois all the way to Chicago, and I never looked back. My blood ran cold. My hair stood up. It was one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen in my entire life." End quote. This one confused me just a little bit because he said no orifices as though the face were blank, but then he said it was like he was staring at a skeleton, and while they don't have organs or features, skeletons do have orifices. There are holes where the eyes could be, and you see where the nose and mouth once were or should be, etc. I think he meant it had a blank face, but was maybe so skinny it was like a skeleton. Anyway, and regardless of that one confusing point, I believe again that he may have seen something he wasn't supposed to out there. It makes me wonder, though, how many of these horrific, grotesque, and downright terrifying entities are out there just roaming the streets and on the sides of highways and rural roads all of the times, and we just don't ever see them. The thought is enough to keep me in my house, that's for sure. I already see enough terrifying stuff on a constant basis. Although, if I would come face to face with something like what Nate described in his encounter, a faceless thing, I may be able to find out exactly what it is. But would I even really want to know? Probably not. So, like I said, there are a ton of accounts and reports coming in from all over the world about people encountering entities that seem to have no face at all. There's just nothing there. And I think about horror movies in my head where I've seen this type of thing. But of course, the names of them escape me now because I want to name them for you. The point is, they're the stuff that nightmares are literally made of. Here's another encounter with something that is seemingly faceless, and it comes from Lon Strickler's website, Phantoms and Monsters, which is probably my second most favorite website for doing these videos and bringing them to you. Our witness lives in Okanagan Valley in BC, Canada. According to whoever wrote the story, he was with a friend and they were just randomly driving around and through some heavily forested roads in the darkness of the night. It was something they appeared to have done all of the time until one night. This is what he said happened to them. Quote, "Me and my friend was together and we were on the hills about 5 miles from the nearest residential building. We drove into a completely remote corner and suddenly saw an elderly woman walking along the side of a dirt road. She was wrapped in a long shawl, or it was a coat with a hood. We were both surprised by her and my friend asked me, 'Can we stop and give her a lift?' I nodded and he slowed down to ask the woman if she needed help or if she had lost her way. But when we got very close to her, we saw her face, or rather the place where the face should have been. But there was nothing there, just one big gray hole. We were both speechless after what we saw, and when we slowly drove away from there, I looked in the rearview mirror for a long time as we left the woman. It was 2 or 3 a.m. and there was no reasonable explanation for what an elderly woman could be doing out there in the wilderness. And we both saw, well, that she had no face." End quote. I wonder why they chose to slowly, as he put it, drive out of there. Most people would have sped out of there with the quickness and never looked back. I know I would have. Let's move on to another case that comes from the Phantoms and Monsters website, to a witness who said she had her encounter in the middle of the afternoon. She was on her way to pick her kid up from school, but realized she was going to be very early, and so she made the decision to stop at a small park that she referred to as, quote, "a historical park," end quote, where there was a mill from back in the early 19th century and other things she thought would be interesting to spend some time viewing. She said in the article, quote, "As soon as I left the parking lot, I felt a strong cadaveric smell, as if a decomposing body of a large animal was lying nearby. I have had many cases of encountering anomalous phenomena before, so I immediately realized that there was something unusual here. I quickly got into the car, and when I started to take a U-turn in the rearview mirror, I saw a golden Honda in the back seat, of which was a woman without a face and with matted, long brown hair. Instead of a face, she had a hole, and she herself was completely black. Her hair looked very matted and had small twigs tangled in it," end quote. Is she implying that she saw a dead and decomposing corpse in the car that was behind her? That's what it sounds like to me, and I know very well from experience that a ghost that needs help, that has unfinished business, or for so many other random reasons that seemingly make no sense to us most of the time, choose to show themselves in their death state or otherwise rotting when they need something from you. However, why in the world would the body have been in a car that was actually there? That's what kind of threw me off here. I mean, it sounds to me like she was witnessing a lost spirit or an earthbound spirit who needed help and was showing themselves as they were killed. It was probably a murder victim, and I'm just going by experience here. But the fact that it was in an actual car, I don't understand. Let me know what you guys all think in the comments below, please. But that's not where the story ends. She goes on to say that the entity then followed her until she pulled out of the parking lot. See, here's where a bit more information would be helpful. Was the corpse or whatever it was driving? The woman said she had always had experiences with the strange and possibly paranormal. So I wonder if she has some major abilities that no longer want or are willing to be suppressed, but it doesn't explain the car. Our next witness encountered their terrifying entity in a little town just south of Dallas, Texas. He was walking from his girlfriend's house where he had just left to go to his car. So, of course, the roads he had to walk on to get to his vehicle were dark and desolate, with some random streetlights placed here and there that didn't even really illuminate much. However, he had his vehicle parked underneath one of the lights, so it was in the small pool of light provided for safety reasons. He felt like because he had to get into his car on this dark, creepy, and extremely desolate road, he should be safe and make sure there was light while he was getting into the vehicle. Well, it was a nice thought anyway, the pretense of safety, because there was a light and he could see. Had to have been safe, right? I'm just saying, guys, maybe it would have been better had he not been able to see. He had walked this road and parked on that street and even under that same street light many times before, and he didn't think anything of it. It was creepy, yes, but not so much so that he ever thought he would see what he did. He said of the thing that was waiting for him by his car, quote, "I remember walking off her porch and starting my way down the street a few houses down until I could start to see my car under that yellow light, maybe 100 yards away at that point. It was awfully quiet and dark, but at this point I had no signs to alert me of anything to be worried about. It wasn't until I walked right up to my car and around the driver's side that I came across a very odd and off-putting sight. It was a man, maybe my height at around 6 feet, in normal clothing/wear, but was crouching about 15 feet away from my car. Looked maybe middle-aged to me, but even though the light was shining above to show his clothing and figure clearly, I couldn't make out any facial features or anything of that matter. My first reaction was possibly a car robbery or a homeless man, but that fear quickly turned to dread. It was the type of feeling where you knew you were feeling fear, but it was a type of fear of something unfamiliar, yet I knew something was off and unnatural about this. Growing up in a big city, I have had plenty of run-ins with people in the streets, whether just friendly homeless or drug-affected people acting out. However, both of these suspicions faded away as I stood there dead still, just staring, expecting some type of reaction. At this point, maybe 10 seconds had passed, and I made the first move to get into my car quickly and lock the doors, being sure not to lose sight of the man all along. I turned the car on and reversed back to turn my car so that my headlights are directly facing the man. This is when my stomach absolutely dropped. His face was just blank. With my headlights on him, I could now see him clearly, a collared long-sleeve button-up and dark pants, but his face was completely void of any features. No eyes, no mouth, just indentations and outlines of where they should be found, almost like an unfinished wax figurehead of some sort. While viewing him, I realized he was now standing and seemed taller. That's when I looked down to see he was now floating, maybe a foot off of the ground, facing my car directly. The amount of fear I felt at this point made my face feel numb, and every alarm bell in my brain told me to leave now. I turned my car around and quickly drove away towards the college." End quote. Again, guys, I have no idea what the hell is happening here. I mean, no faces? It's actually becoming quite commonplace in the work that I do. And in some instances, I do believe people are encountering demons, because I know some people are going to say that. But in most cases, I just don't know. I just keep going back to the element of surprise, like we are not supposed to be able to see what we are seeing nowadays. And not just with the faceless entities, but with everything else that we discuss here on this channel, for the most part at least. We seem to be catching them by surprise, and to me that's so interesting, because why do they think they can just lurk like this and not be spotted? What is their purpose? Because they don't seem to be feeding off of the fear of the witnesses. They seem to be getting caught in the act of doing something. Again, I have thought myself into a circle. Let's move on. Our next case comes from the little town of Pine Grove, Pennsylvania, and Reddit poster Similar Economics 4. He said he had this frightening experience while he was growing up in that town, and he and his brother were taking a shortcut to his best friend's house through an alleyway when it happened. Never a good idea, by the way, but okay. Our witness made sure to mention that the town was tiny and extremely safe, with everyone knowing everyone else, and therefore anyone who wasn't from there would definitely stick out like a sore thumb. However, the two of them had an encounter with a mysterious stranger that would stick with them a lifetime. He said, quote, "My brother and I started getting closer to our friend's house, and we see this man by the stop sign at the end of the alley. The stop sign is past our friend's house about 150 yards away. He looked like what I would picture God looking like. White man, silky white pants, and shirt. As we get closer, my head starts pounding faster, and I realize he's floating and not walking. My brother saw it too and said he's floating, and we started running. The man thing looked at us. At this point, he was about 100 yards away from us, and he literally had no face, just blank, blurred face. No eyes, no nose, no nothing. We had reached our friend's house and they were asking why we looked so scared. We told them what had happened and the boys rode their bikes around the neighborhood but saw no one that fit our description. I still to this day have no idea what the heck it was, but it still makes my heart race." End quote. These entities with big blurs over their faces are becoming so commonplace, as I found out through all of my extensive research into them, and yet it seems no one is really talking about them at all. It's insane, and like I've said a few times before, what else is just lurking around outside of the periphery of our vision all or most of the time that we are only sometimes and accidentally aware of? It scares me. Something I've also noticed, guys, despite it not being explicitly stated, is that these entities seem to bring with them or exude a sense of malevolence, terror, and or dread. I believe that those feelings are instinctual and go far and well beyond the physical sensations of the same things. It's like an intuitive sense that these things are evil or at the very least lower vibrational and without good intentions when it concerns us. Reddit poster Miranda Mandarin said that when she was a child, she and her friend Cecilia were in her room playing by themselves and suddenly noticed they weren't alone anymore. It was made even more creepy, in my opinion at least, in that whatever the entity was, it wasn't exactly in the room with them. I'll let her explain in her own words. She said, quote, "At some point while we were playing, I looked up and saw something on the other side of the window. I have no idea how to describe this thing, and I haven't heard anyone else mention anything that sounded familiar. From the neck down, it looked like a person. I can't remember what it was wearing, but I think it was dressed in a dark blazer. The collar was visible, so I knew it was facing us. From the neck up, everything started to look very wrong. Its head was heart-shaped, its skin was brown and leathery like the hide of an animal, but it was slightly translucent, and beneath the leathery skin, I could see thick, pulsing black and dark blue veins. There was no face. I remember looking at this thing for a moment and it was like my brain had fuzzed over being scared. And I remember thinking something like, no, that's not meant to be there. That's not what a person looks like. I remember being paralyzed with shock and fear. I wanted to bolt, but I couldn't move. I suddenly felt really sick, like the room was blurry and spinny. I don't remember the thing walking away, but one moment it was there and the next it was gone. Cecilia and I both stood up wordlessly and walked solemnly outside. I remember feeling unnaturally cold, wobbly and fragile, and a little too thin like you do when you're coming down with the flu. We walked to the front of the house and we each grabbed onto a parent and snuggled into them until they finished their conversation. Celia and I never talked about it, end quote. So this one is reminiscent of some extraterrestrial encounters I've come across, and I wonder if these kids were taken at any point in their lives, either up to that point, during that time, or after. And also, I wonder if they were on the first floor or if the thing was looking at them through a higher story. Like, did it walk up to the window or were they on the second floor and it floated on up or was flying? I also wonder if there were woods around where she lived at the time of this encounter. But for all intents and purposes, if I had to make an educated guess, I would say this one is some sort of unknown extraterrestrial. What do you guys think? This is like the easiest one so far, in my opinion. So just so you guys are aware, I also had a very hard time shaking the image of Slender Man as I read through these encounters, or at least the image of his faceless face. While I haven't yet done my video on Slender Man and the fact that he is more than likely a real entity at this point, and so I kind of want to save that thought process for that video or the next video on faceless entities, but I mean, if you think about that, am I right? Professional Date 24 posted on Reddit what happened to her when she was just 18 years old and her mom was giving her a ride to work. She explained, quote, "On Saturdays I worked the morning shift, so I had to be at work by 5 a.m. That means I had to leave my house at no later than 4:30. It was still dark outside, like pitch black and very cold. That morning, as my mom drove me to work from a distance, I could see a figure getting ready to cross the road, basically jaywalking in front of us. As we got closer, I could see it was a young girl. I thought to myself, damn, caught her doing the walk of shame, LOL. She had no shoes, a long white shirt, like if she was wearing a man's t-shirt. It was big on her. It looked like she had no pants on, but you could barely see she had these short jean shorts under her large shirt, like the kind that used to be pants, but she cut herself to make shorts. She wasn't wearing shoes. My mom started talking poop in Spanish, like what kind of girl walks around the streets at this hour dressed like that? She was walking in the middle of the street super slow to the point of my mom having to stop at like 10 feet away from her because she was still in the street, but now she was blocking us. When my mom stopped, the girl came to a complete stop, but wasn't facing us. It was facing in the direction it was crossing from my right to left. As we got close, I could see her skin was a real bluish gray. Her hair was black. It looked wet and tangled and like she had just gotten out of the shower. My mom was about to honk at her when she slowly turned her head to look right at us. Her hair was covering her face. She looked like the girl from The Ring. The part that I'll never forget was that she moved her hair out of the way and she had no face, like nothing. It was all just smooth. Like Slender Man, no eyes, no mouth, no nose. It just looked smooth. My mom started to have a panic attack. I literally felt my heart drop. I was now focused on calming my mom down. The girl looked at us for like 2 to 3 seconds and took off running. It didn't move at irregular speeds, but now it was active. I never saw anything like that in my life. Till this day, my mom and I can't explain what it was. I guess I was sharing my story in the hopes that maybe someone else has seen something similar, something with no face, end quote. This one took it to a whole new level because at first I was wondering if they had just kind of stumbled upon an earthbound spirit, a ghost that is not at rest. Perhaps a drowning victim who was murdered and was either lost or needed some sort of justice to be done before she would move on from this mortal coil. I felt bad for her at first. Now, don't get me wrong, as this is not to say that the entity wasn't just that, but I honestly don't know. Faceless and having no mouth, meaning voiceless and a child, well, you can see where I'm going with this here, right? It wouldn't be the first time an entity such as a restless spirit felt so incredibly wronged and victimized that they spend their eternity looking like this to others, and they do so on purpose. Who knows, maybe she wanted to be followed and would have led the poster and her mother to something. I haven't gotten this feeling yet about any of the other cases I've covered or that I've gone through, but in this case, I very much feel like the spirit was presenting herself as faceless for a reason. Because of the victimization, the dehumanization, and the lack of a voice, okay, that she must have endured during her obvious murder, if we took it in that context. What the reason would be, I honestly don't know. I couldn't tell you why the earthbound spirit chose that person, or I really don't know. That's just what makes the most sense to me right now. But in reality, none of this, what we're talking about now, or a lot of what we talk about in general on this channel, makes much sense. Not really. And all we can do is make educated guesses based on the information we're given, if we decide to believe that information in the first place. A poster named PLIMPP69 said on Reddit that his encounter with a faceless humanoid entity happened right in his own bedroom. This encounter happened a little more on the recent side in 2011 when he was a freshman in high school. He said he jumped up from a deep sleep at around 1 a.m. for no apparent reason, but then soon discovered something terrifying, that he wasn't alone in his own room. He said, quote, "A few minutes later, I heard faint footsteps. At first, I was thinking it was just in my head. After a few minutes, I started to look around as I usually do whenever I wake up. I heard the footsteps again, but this time they sounded like they were literally outside my room. In my peripheral vision, I noticed that I couldn't see into my brother's room. He also used to sleep with the door open, and his room is across from mine. It was as if something was standing in front or blocking the entry. I got curious and turned to see what was blocking the entry, and I saw a humanoid figure about 7 feet tall. It was faceless, bald, and had a fair complexion. It was dressed old-fashioned. It had a cream-colored sweater with what appeared to be random paint strokes and splashes on it of many colors, and black slacks. It was just standing there as if it were looking at me. I started analyzing it. It was abnormally thin and had freakishly long arms way past the knee. It also had visible veins running all over its faceless expression. I thought I was dreaming at first. I started blinking, shaking my head, slapping myself in the hopes that I was dreaming or hallucinating. I stopped and looked across again. It was still standing there. I immediately freaked out when I found out I was not dreaming and pulled the covers over my face. I tried yelling for help and I couldn't scream at all from the terror. 30 minutes later, I built up courage and pulled the covers off to confront it, and it was gone. I haven't seen it ever since. My youngest brother also happened to see that thing earlier this year, end quote. So, and as many of you may or may not know, I never know which encounters I'm going to be including in a video until I include them. And I do that in order to keep my surprise as genuine as yours, and so I can record my initial thoughts to you guys without overthinking and overanalyzing my responses. While the other encounter also said the entity had veins running through its face, I stick by my initial assessment that in that case we were dealing with some sort of extraterrestrial entity. However, by the description of this entity, and there are many more differences than similarities, a new thought has popped into my mind as I write this. What about interdimensionals? Could these faceless things be from a realm or dimension similar to ours, but different enough that we aren't recognizing these entities as human beings? Are they human beings who, for whatever reason, and possibly due to the route that they take to get here, aren't able to fully form everything, to fully form themselves? After all, especially when they're wearing or seem to be wearing clothes, how do we know there's actually anything underneath the clothes? The long arm stuck out to me too because we keep seeing that in so many encounters with so many entities nowadays, whereas in the recent past, that type of description was reserved mainly only for cryptids. I don't know for sure, but again, it's at the very least worth mentioning. Also, another identifying characteristic that seems to come up over and over again in these encounters is the fact that these faceless creatures are abnormally thin, almost to the point of looking like skeletons. Our last encounter for this video comes from Reddit user A Jar of Pickles 97, and it happened in Huntington Beach, California. He was with his mother, but in a very busy section of that town, which also makes this stand out to me a little bit more. It wasn't, a dark bedroom in the middle of the night. It wasn't a dark, desolate, out of the way road somewhere. It was in the middle of a crowded shopping town. The main reason is that it's almost unusual for a crowded place to be where someone sees something like this, but also because it's been coming up time and again in all sorts of encounters with tons of different types of entities recently that they're being seen in these crowded city areas. Again, too, that should be terrifying to think about because how many people in this very crowded area of the town did not see this thing? How many of us are still completely oblivious to entities like these around us all the time? While more and more people are certainly and without a doubt becoming more and more awakened and therefore open to seeing these types of things, there are still those among us who are simply too closed off, for one reason or another, to be able to really comprehend the reality of the environment and certain things around them. The poster also said he knew for sure that what he was seeing was not only terrifying, but also that it was extremely malevolent. Quote, "What makes my encounter unique is that it takes place in Huntington Beach, California, one of the biggest urban centers on the planet, far, far away from any kind of forest. When I was a young boy, about 7, my mother would often take me on trips to R.R. Donnelley Financial, where she worked as a salary woman. There would be about an hour-long car ride where I really couldn't do much of anything the entire time. So I would look outside and read the signs or comment on cool-looking cars. Things most kids would do in the car. However, on 3 separate occasions, I can quite vividly remember looking into the cab of another car and seeing a person that did not have a face. Some people report encounters where they could see the indentation of the facial features, but no eyes, ears, lips, etc. But the ones I saw literally looked like a dome of flesh. The best description on the internet I have found is like fabric stretched over a softball. The moment I would look at all of them, they would immediately turn their head to look right back over at me. Naturally, as a young boy, I was absolutely petrified and I would dart back inside the car praying they didn't see me. However, when I would peek out from below the car window, they would always be looking right at me. The vibe I got from all of them was extremely unsettling as well. Whenever I would stare into that faceless visage, I got the sense that they were extremely pissed off, as if they wanted to physically attack me if there weren't 2 cars in the way and we weren't in the middle of the street. It was like all of them hated my guts just for being able to see them in the first place, end quote. Yeah, see what I'm saying here, guys? Malevolence, anger, sort of like the vibe someone or something would give off, and also that they would feel if they were caught doing something they either weren't supposed to be doing or just being caught in the first place when they shouldn't have been able to be seen. Does whatever this is have to do with the government? Could it be that the theory that some shadow beings are actually time travelers and that's the only way they could either form or be seen also pertains to other entities as well, such as with at least some of these faceless humanoid things? It's something we may never have the answers to, and the fact that he saw these things more than once, presumably from what he reported on the same stretch of road too, really sticks out to me and makes me wonder if even more people are timeline jumping into certain areas and that these areas make us more susceptible to doing so. I honestly don't know, guys, but I'm definitely looking forward to hearing what you all have to say about it all in the comments below. This one is hard for me to pin down, and that's very unusual for me. So when I come across something that's extremely hard for me to pin down and that I really have no idea, it scares me a little bit, but it excites me as well. Please make sure, guys, when commenting that you not only respect others, not only respect me, but respect yourselves as well. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, and if you enjoyed hanging out with each other, if you attended the premiere. I do apologize once again for my voice. I hope it was understandable and not too grating and annoying. If you guys really couldn't understand it or whatever, I will redo it once my voice gets a little better, and I'm hoping that that's soon because this is very frustrating. On Wednesday nights right here on this channel from 7:15 p.m. Eastern time until 11 or 11:30, or until we run out of people to read for, come on in and get one card pulled for you for an intuitive oracle reading and see what your next week or two is going to be like, what it's going to all be about with myself and Ghost Dragon ZW. On Thursday nights, every other week, you will find myself, Ghost Dragon ZW, and Miss Paranormal Pixie Lara for Chillax and Chat at 8 p.m. Eastern. And on the Thursdays in between, it will be only Miss Lara with Conversations with Lara, the Paranormal Pixie Hour, also at 8 p.m. Eastern. Most Friday nights, you will find Ghost Dragon ZW at midnight with Midnight Vibes, Conversations with a Ghost Dragon. So every other Monday, we'll have afternoon talk at noon, myself and Ghost Dragon ZW. So that will not be on the Monday you are watching this, but the following Monday. If you would like personal intuitive oracle reading from me, I'm doing them half price through the summer for a general remote reading. I also offer other more in-depth and more, I don't want to say personal because they're all personal, but like a face-to-face, or you get to ask more questions, the spiritual sessions, all of that kind of stuff. But the general remote readings will only be half price at $20 to my PayPal or Cash App. Ways to donate to the channel: PayPal, Cash App, Patreon. Also in the description box, guys. That helps me pay for StreamYard. It helps me buy decks for the oracle reading. It helps me with my equipment, as minimal as it may be. All right, so it does help to keep the channel going. It pays for the backgrounds and you know, all types of stuff. It's not just me getting paid to go shopping. Do you know what I'm saying? So if you'd like to send me a gift, also the link for my Amazon wish list gift link is in the description box. My books, Missing the Fae Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond, the Kindle and paperback versions on Amazon. Those links also in the description box. If you want information about any of the products that I make homemade or any of the things that I offer as far as helping you guys with your spirituality, entity attachments, energetic assistance, just whatever you guys need, GemmaJadeParanormal at gmail.com. I'm forgetting a lot of stuff, but this killed my voice, so I just have to talk to you guys about it another time. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, you're beautiful, you're amazing, you're capable, you are abundant by nature. Everything you want is right there in the ether. You just have to believe that you can have it, believe that it's yours, and grab it. I believe in you. I sincerely believe in you, and don't let anyone make you feel less than, put you down, belittle, dehumanize you. You're worth it. And you are totally worthy of achieving your goals and being prosperous. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.